د کابل ټلویزیون درنو لیدونکو په نیکو هیلو او سلامونه مو هرکلی کوم. په دې خپرونه کې د افغانستان لپاره د اروپایي ټولنې ځانګړي استازي ښاغلي توماس نیکولسن سره د افغانستان په روان بشري او سیاسي وضعیت او دغه راز له نړیوالې ټولنې سره د اسلامي امارت د تعامل او ځینو نورو اړوندو مسایلو په تړاو ځانګړې مرکه لرو. په دې هیله چې تاسې هم د خپرونې تر پایه زموږ ملتیا وکړئ. As Mansoor Nekmaliam, thank you so much for the time. How do you assess the political situation, security situation and humanitarian situation of Afghanistan?
I'm very happy to be back in Kabul, first of all, after 5 months. But I must say that the question you raise actually is one where I cannot be very optimistic. Afghanistan is facing a very harsh winter ahead, as it did last year. On the political side, we see human rights in many areas, not only the rights of women, but also rights of minorities, media freedom being restricted, as extremely troubling. And we see no steps at national level towards a more inclusive government.
Afghanistan is facing economical crisis and a humanitarian crisis. Which one is the worst for the country?
I don't think you can really prioritize one over the other. I mean, the humanitarian crisis is immediate and absolute. If you can't find food, if you can't live, it's over. But then the economic crisis, the security and the rights aspects. I mean, people need all of this. People need to be able to work. People need to have their rights respected, and people need to feel secure. I know this is a very tall order for an insurgency movement or a terrorist movement that has been fighting for 20 years and suddenly find themselves, because they choose to, be in a position where they are supposed to deliver, but they have not so far been able to do so convincingly. The Taliban tell me, and I understand their position, they look at the things they have done. They are surprised themselves sometimes by what they have achieved, and they find me being critical by looking at the things they have not achieved, and that's perhaps where our conversation starts.
Yeah. No country has still recognized the new government, IEA. What's the reason?
The reason is that the Taliban took power the way they did, that they have not respected its commitments to the international community when it comes to counterterrorism, when it comes to respect for human rights, when it comes to clearly declaring that it fully acknowledges its responsibilities under the UN Charter, for example. But this is looking at it from outside, and maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. But I think the real starting point should be inside Afghanistan. They haven't, in a credible way, given people the chance to express themselves on the system of governance, on who should govern the country, and on the policies. And they claim that by the fact that people didn't fight against them, that didn't crush them militarily, they accept the Taliban as a legitimate government. But that's a definition that few people would accept.
Taliban says that our government is inclusive, but the international community says it's not inclusive. The Taliban say the international community doesn't have any specific definition from the inclusive government. As your view, how can they form an inclusive government?
The Taliban often refer to two facts when it comes to, or alleged facts when it comes to inclusivity. They point to a number of their ministers who are from a different ethnic background there, who are non-Pashtuns. And they also claim that the majority of the former civil servants stayed and continue to working for the Taliban. Now, that doesn't include any representatives of non-Taliban in the government. That doesn't include any women. And women, for example, have actively been dismissed or encouraged not to turn up at work. So what If the Taliban ask me for a definition, and they have done so repeatedly, and I will state basically what I've said before, what is needed is not, we don't need to look at the individuals, we need to look at the processes. And there has to be a process where each and every Afghan adult, man and woman, have a clear, recognized way to express himself and herself about the future of the country, the political system, who should govern, and what the policies should be. That would be my definition of an inclusive political process. I think we should look at the process rather than looking at the government as such.
Taliban Supreme Leader Sheikh Hebatullah Akhundzada, which is in Kandahar, how you met him?
He is supposed to be in Kandahar, and he's also supposed to have been in Kabul in July. But from what I understand, there are not a lot of people who have seen him. We didn't go to Kandahar this time, unfortunately. We only had the time and the ability to meet acting ministers in Kabul. And of course I hope in future visits that we can see also other parts of Afghanistan.
Yes, he is a main decision maker as a representative of European Union. Why you haven't still met with him? Why haven't you still talked about different important issues?
I think it's quite normal, as also in more established political systems, you engage with mostly the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And you would expect the minister to transmit and to convey your messages, and also convey messages if there would be any from the supreme leadership. I would of course not be against having a meeting with the emir. I would in fact be happy to do so, and let's see whether that would be possible on another visit. But I also understand that several countries and the diplomats have tried to reach him, and their requests for meetings have been turned down.
Meanwhile, Ukraine war, does European Union still has interest in Afghanistan's situation? If yes, for what reason?
I think we have, some may feel an obligation because our commitment to the country from before. We have been actively supporting the Afghan people through various development programs, also support to civil society. We have tried to contribute to improved healthcare and education for boys and girls. We have to try to contribute to employment opportunities for Afghans. So some may look at, and some are just fascinated by the country. Now, these are not very long-lasting reasons. I understand them and I feel with them. But I think we have our interests as well. We have an interest in a stable Afghanistan that is not a threat to its neighbors. We have an interest in a stable Afghanistan where people see an opportunity to live, so they're not forced to leave their country and go to neighboring countries or to Europe. We have an interest in a responsible government in Afghanistan that can control and can prevent the smuggling of drugs to neighboring countries and to Europe. And we also have an interest in an Afghanistan that gradually, where the economy will be growing, we could see it as an market for export market, we could see it as an import market, and as I said, a stable Afghanistan is good for the region and is good for the world.
Yes, U.S. transferred Afghanistan frozen $3.5 billion of Afghanistan frozen assets to Switzerland. What's your opinion about that decision of U.S.?
There were, I think, around $9 billion of frozen central bank assets outside Afghanistan, and they were frozen, as I mentioned, because of the way in which the Taliban took power. This is a normal procedure. No other country has made any attempts to move money closer to Afghanistan, so U.S. is a front runner in that sense. Why do they not move it further? Well, I think the reasons are that there is no convincing, there is no clarity about the independence of the central bank. There is no clarity about the capacity of the central bank to prevent resources to be diverted for terrorist purposes. And until that happens, the money cannot be moved further. I think you can always, again, you can see the glass as half full or half empty. I would see it as a half full glass and as a sign that if credible action is taken by the Taliban, some of this money could eventually, and ideally in the long term, all of this money should go back to Afghanistan.
No one has claimed the responsibility for the Kaj Educational Center. Who might have done it?
There are a lot of speculations, and many would speculate in one direction. For me, it shows, and I visited some of the students in the hospital yesterday. It shows in a very clear and tangible way, and unfortunately too many Afghans have already experienced this, what terrorism means, the consequences, shattered dreams for the future, and bodies that will never be the same. And it also, I think, really, to me and to others who, and as I said, many Afghans have experienced this. It's another argument why Afghanistan needs to search and to make efforts towards reconciliation, to find a better future, and really a call on the Afghan authorities to do whatever they can while respecting human rights, of course, to protect all the population of Afghanistan from such attacks.
As a last question, what is your opinion about NRF resistance front?
I think it is clear from the European Union side, we do not provide support for armed resistance, neither political support or in material way. I personally respect the choice of those who go down that route, but I'm also personally worried that such movements, at the current stage at least, will increase the risk that Afghanistan gets back into a new cycle of violence. And I still think that dialogue, internal and with external partners, is a better option.
Yes, thank you so much for the interview.
Thank you for having me.